unbelievable people that epitomize mentorship, true mentorship, that where teacher does not become jealous of student and the opposite, and where teacher or student has learned, and as Chris has said, to honor, to make wine, but in her own way. And now I'm just going to embarrass Deidre, I think, because what she has created and what she is doing, I think, has forever and will forever change viticulture in America. And it's already not only influencing viticulture here, but it's turning Europeans to pay attention, the old world of winemaking. And I put it in an article, and I'll say it here, that what they're doing is shaping what viticulture might look like in 100 years. And it's just a good reminder that these things do take a lot of time in kind of a warp speed life that we live. We just saw mentorship at its finest, and what's so lovely for me is to be introducing our keynote speaker tonight, who is my mentor, Lisa Granik, who, amongst many things, is a master of wine. Maybe one of your least interesting things. Because she is absolutely fascinating. And I mentioned the little vignette about me going to the West Bank. And what that did was also make me take a little account of things that I had heard in places that I had been before. And in 2015, when I was in the Caucasus with Lisa in the Republic of Georgia, she said something that resonated at the time, but really came back in a powerful way as I was starting to move into borderless wine and this idea. And in no uncertain terms, actually, no, Lisa said this pretty much word for word, which was, every bottle of wine that you buy from the Republic of Georgia, which is to say every bottle of wine that wasn't going to Russia, who still remains to be their largest buyer in somewhat of a Stockholm syndrome type way, every bottle of wine that goes somewhere else is not only honoring 8,000 years of winemaking tradition, but it's one more bottle of wine, it's however many more dollars of an autonomous Republic of Georgia. I had never thought of wines in such terms. So, and I mentioned earlier, you will be pouring wine for the person next to you. So, for Lisa's, which is a very Georgian thing to do, you'll pour wine, you'll feed each other. It's a crazy experience. Without further ado, my mentor, the Borderless Wine Alliance board member, Lisa Granik. So you just click one. And I don't know how to go backwards, so be careful.
That's all right. Okay, so soil and sweat. That's what makes wine. And I was thinking I'm going to steal a little bit from somebody for whom I never voted, but the late John McCain, who said in a late riposte, that we are a country of ideas, and borderless wine is an idea. And I think I'm going to try to explain in a little greater detail what I explained to Peter and why the country of Georgia is important to me. I am not Georgian. I am not married to a Georgian. I basically have no affiliation with that country, and I ended up there by accident. However, I think a lot of us in the wine industry often wonder, what are we doing? Does this really matter? And I will go, personally, there are ways in which I do see that, as I explained to Peter, you can work in the wine industry and feel in some small way, because all we can do is something small, most of us, to move the world in a different place. And I think it's something that, for this country, a country of ideas, maybe right now is even more important. Okay, there we go. We've had maps. There's not going to be too much in the map department. It's not going to be very technical. There's no quiz at the end. But if you look at this map of Georgia, it's a very tiny country. It's about the size, it's in between the size of Ireland and West Virginia. And if you look at the gray part, which is all the mountainous areas, you can see that actually a very limited amount of the country is arable. And while the northern boundary with Russia largely kept it separate from Russia, we know that Russia has been more recently more involved. When I say more recently for a country that has a history going back at least 8,000 years, more recent means a couple of hundred. So in any event, Russia has been more involved with the country and as of 2006 was 86% of their export market when Russia decided that they were going to embargo all Georgian wine. The industry was in crisis. Okay? So first of all, you had an industry that never heard of diversification. Secondly, you have most wine growers. You have a very poor country. Okay? I'm going to show you, this is just a few, these are just random pictures that I took. I mean, I go to Georgia a lot, and this is what you see as you travel around. There was great unrest in the 1990s. Basically civil war after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and there has not been, it's not important enough, it's certainly not among the top 20 countries for the United States to invest in, and so a lot of this remains. This is downtown Tbilisi. This is actually the center of the old historic area, which hundreds of years ago, we talk Turkey, crossroads of the culture of East and West, Georgia as well. This was the Silk Route. There is a mosque, there is an Armenian church, a Georgian church, and a synagogue, all within not even a square kilometer of each other, right? This is the historic area. And then when we think about wine country in California or the beautiful vineyards in Burgundy, this is Georgian wine country. Okay? It is the overwhelming majority of wine growers live on subsistence. I don't want to even say wages, at a subsistence level. Okay, they will never have the infrastructure, the ability. Some of them will. We're going to talk about some of them. There are some who are trying to make wine themselves and sell it in the way that the small growers in Champagne finally got around to doing. The Georgians, because there is very little industry indigenous to the country, there is little happening outside of the two major cities. And so we have wine. When economists study economies, every economy has three different sectors, okay? So there's agriculture, okay? Wine, obviously. There is grape growing. Then there is manufacturing. That would be wine production, whether it's building, making bottles, or all of the infrastructure that goes into, whether it's barrels, qvevri, etc. And then finally, so I said wine equipment, production, and then services, hospitality, tourism, etc., etc. So wine logistics. Wine is relatively unusual in that it supports and has an effect on every single element of a country's economy. And so wine has been very important in Georgia, is particularly because wine is largely a rural phenomenon or industry. And rural Georgia is very, very poor. But what has happened is that a number of people have gone in and are teaching the local population that really, where there is not much to do other than grow tomatoes, cucumbers, and persimmons, how to graft, okay? I mean, this is like, these are real people, and these are not just happy workers it's not a Potemkin village here, okay? Learning how to graft and so forth. Now, if you look, I mean, I have had a couple of images of this particular winery. It's a larger winery in eastern Georgia. And the winery, why is this particular image important? We're in the middle of nowhere in western Georgia. We had there's a bottle of wine that I had there, the Lag Venari. This is not this particular winery's wine, but the point with this issue is one of the other ways in that wine is so important in Georgia is that you have a country where, like many, if you remember, you're not going to remember the song. I don't remember the song. I remember my grandfather singing the song. How are you going to keep them down in the far after they've seen Paris? In other words, when there's nothing happening in the rural area, people want to go to the cities. And everybody has been leaving these small towns in Georgia. There's a family. I think they're coming up. Well, I'll get there. Yeah. Well, how do we keep them down the far? So this is another family friend, right? He decided he's going to have his wines in downtown Tbilisi. So this is not too far from that downtown image of where everything was falling apart, but they were able to rebuild a house, and of course there's a garden, and he has grapes, and he's going to take his grapes to be fermented by a friend, but he's in town. Instead, you've got younger people who are choosing to stay in the small villages to try and bring their country to another place. So, what is wine? What is borderless wine really about? I mean, borderless. It's really about the number one rule of the wine business, which is what? It is relationships. Okay. And so when I talk about this being a country of ideas, and this is something that to get political, this is something that it's soft diplomacy. This is something that I think in this country we maybe need more than we ever did. And this is